Welcome back everybody to another tutorial here for the OddAlerts API. In this one we are going to be taking a look at the Fixtures endpoints and we're going to be creating a database. So on the right side is the code that I will walk you through, and at the minute this isn't finished. We'll update this as the video goes, but at the moment we've got a couple of functions. The entry function is update fixtures, and this goes away. We have a function called get fixtures, so we're going to get the fixtures and then we're going to add them to a database which we will create in a moment. So just wanted to start by saying, regardless of your plans in terms of what you're going to develop with, whether it's Python, PHP, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails, R, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you just understand fundamentally the steps that are being taken, the logic. I say that because you can then just adapt to any of the programming languages. They all have the ability to do what I'm about to show you in PHP. And just like I mentioned on the previous API tutorial on YouTube, if you're having any troubles, questions, get your comments in and I will do my best to respond to every single one as soon as possible. And remember that ChatGPT is your friend. I will link to the code as well. And if you want, you could literally just ask ChatGPT to give you this for Python, for R, and it will have the equivalent, because what we are doing here is quite basic stuff, as you will see. Now we'll take a look at the fixture endpoints here. So we've got individual fixtures, and for any API call, you've got data.oddalerts.com/API/fixtures, and then this ID, if you put a number in here, it will accept it as the ID of the fixture. You can see that output there. And if you put multiple, the word multiple, it will allow you to then insert multiple IDs at the end of the fixture as a parameter, like so. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see we've got the upcoming fixtures, which is fixtures/upcoming. That'll show you the next 7 days worth of data. If you just want to keep your database fresh, you could ping this once a day or a few times a day, completely up to you. And fixtures/live if you want to access all of the games that are currently in play. And you can use the includes as well to include stats, probability, and pressure from oddalerts.com, the pressure monitor, of course. All the probability values as well, so you can trigger some very, very interesting in-play alerts from your own server or from your own computer. And then we have the between endpoint, which is what we will be using for this example. So we could say, show me the next 6 hours of games, show me the next 12 hours, show me the last 48 hours if you want to update your database. So it's a very, very handy endpoint, this one, fixtures/between, and then you pass in a Unix timestamp of the date you want to go from and to. So if you're not familiar with it, what a Unix timestamp is, it is the amount of seconds that have passed since 1970, the 1st of January, I think they started timing that. Again, I don't know why that's the date, but it just is, and it's a very, very standard practice to use this as a way of saving and filtering and querying on time in a database, because it's always quicker to use integers when filtering over text. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the database. Now, if you're on Windows, I would recommend downloading this application, MAMP. It will emulate an Apache server on your local machine so that you can develop in PHP, but it will also set up that server in the background as well. I then have an application like this, which is called SQL Pro, as you can see at the top there. And this allows you to visually see your database. And if you're on Windows, don't worry, there is something called WAMP, which is very similar. And again, it installs that Apache, MySQL, and PHP as well, and just makes getting started very, very quick. If you are having trouble with that section, again, get your comments in. I will be more than happy to help you on YouTube or Discord. But also, ChatGPT is your friend. What you can do is download the code. I will link it in the description. Pass it into ChatGPT and just say, look, I'm having this issue or whatever is happening or not happening, and just ask it to convert it to Python or to JavaScript or whatever it is you want to develop in, and it'll do it, because the code that we are looking at, it's quite simple. It's not using anything that is specific to PHP. So once you've got MAMP installed or WAMP installed, you can then go and get SQL Pro, and again, there might be an alternative for Windows, there certainly will be. It's just a visual way to create and manage databases to save you having to do it in the terminal. And as you can see, I've created a database here for this demo called OddAlerts API. Now we've got no tables in this database. So we're going to go ahead and create one called Fixtures. Don't worry about those other details. The defaults will be fine for this. Now, every table gets created with an ID, and we're going to keep that. You need it. It is your own unique ID for every fixture that is going to land in this table. Now, before we create the rest of the table, let's take a look at an example response from the Fixtures endpoint. So I've accessed the live endpoint here, and we can see we've got a game in the A-League in play now, and the status actually is half-time at the moment as I record this, 1-0 to the away team. So we could include stats with this, we could check the probability, the shots, the pressure, but for the purpose of this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to use this, and we're going to look at these values here and think, you know, which ones should we save, just for the purpose of this demo, to get ourselves up and running with a football database. So let's first add a property here inside the table, and we will add the Unix first, which is the timestamp as I mentioned before. Let me go ahead and add the rest of these, and then I will come back. So we've added Unix, status, home name, away name, season ID, home goals, and away goals. Now I've got one more to add, and I wanted to show you whilst I added this because it's quite an important one. We're going to click on ID, just so that when I press add, it's going to go underneath, and we are going to add API ID. Now you can call this OddAlerts ID, you could call it OA ID, you can call it unique ID, whatever you want, but this is the OddAlerts ID. This is important to save when it comes to update fixtures. If we make another call to the Fixtures endpoint in 2 days and we want to update the scores, how do we connect the two data sets? Well, it has to be through an ID of sorts, and the OddAlerts ID is that one. So what we're going to do now is you're going to add an index as well. So we click down here, and again, if you're using Terminal to manage your SQL, you can use ChatGPT to find all the commands that you need. Don't be afraid to fail, especially on a local database like this. You just need to get your hands messy. That is the best way to learn. And this kind of index is going to be unique, so we click on that, and then we can click add. And what that does, every time we look to update a fixture, it will look at this API ID and make sure it is one of one. It has to be unique, because if you've got another fixture with the same ID, then you're going to have some problems. There should not be duplicate fixtures. Let's jump back into the code then. I've got update fixtures here. This is a function that is being called when I put my server to API-demo. Now, all of this code that I'm going to show you could be in a single Python file. Absolutely, if you're working with Python, it could be in a single PHP file. I've just created separate functions just to keep things tidy, and I would recommend doing that anyway. So we enter through the update fixtures method or function, and we can see that we set the time to right now, which will give us this Unix timestamp of right now. And then we can say tomorrow equals now plus 24 times 60 times 60, which is 24 hours. And then we say matches equals this.getFixtures. So we are now using another function called getFixtures, and I'll just show you how that works. Okay, so we go up to getFixtures, and it's got two properties. Type equals upcoming, that's the default. And then you've got the parameters if you want to add any or change them. I set some of the default data here. So we've got the API token. We have the page is 1 by default. Next page equals true. And found matches equals a blank array. Now you will see what all of these mean in a moment. As I've said before, it's important to stress, if you are confused by any of this, just try and understand. Don't focus on the specifics, just try and understand the actual logic behind what I'm doing, because if you focus on, oh, I don't understand PHP or I don't understand the syntax, don't worry about that at this moment. Unless you're a coder and you've done this before, you'll probably be absolutely fine with this, but this is just a message to those that have not really coded before. I would say don't worry, you'll get there. So we have this block of code here, which is a do while loop. Quite simple. Quite self-explanatory. We do this whilst this is true. So next page equals true. That's why I set it to true at the start, because we want to keep looping unless the next page is false. So what we do here is we set the URL for the endpoint, and we add the page in here as a parameter. We add any of the parameters that the user has passed through here. We add the API token, of course, and we add the type of fixture as well. So if this was to be default, it would be fixtures/upcoming. But in the getFixtures method here, we are passing between, and then we're passing from now to tomorrow as our parameters. So we expect this to show us all of the games in the next 24 hours. And what it does, it goes away here and gets the data using UniRest, which is a PHP library for making GET requests and POST requests. Now, again, if you're using Python, you can just include the requests package as well to do something similar here. As I said before, if you're struggling, paste the code into ChatGPT and ask it to convert it. Ask it to explain why it's converting it as well, what the differences are between whichever language you want to use and PHP. But all of this is very simple stuff and very replicatable in another language. So this is grabbing the data. These two lines here, we're just setting some data. So we're getting the matches and we're getting the info, and we're just actually creating those variables. If we just look on the left, each response has info and data, and that is consistent across the API. So the info will always be your settings, anything that can change, any additional information about what is inside the data. If you look at the trends endpoint, for example, you can have all of your sorting options and stuff in here. But for this one, it is pagination mainly. So the next page, as you can see here, is false. So if we were using the live endpoint here, get the info, which is this block here, the info property, and then it would say next page equals info, next page URL, which is this. So we look at this and it's false. So we've got it and it's false. Or if it's not there, which it will be, but you never know if there's internet issues on your end or whatever, then we put it to false. Just always important to just have a fallback. And then we loop through the matches that we found. We add them to the found matches array, which was introduced a moment ago. And then we just update the page. We say, okay, let's go to the next page. And then we check this. After every loop, we check this. Is next page still true? Which means, is there a next page to this data? If not, then we just come out and we return the matches that we found, which is this. So let's just test this by outputting the matches here. And we will refresh this, and it's going to look at the next 24 hours. It's going to go away, get those matches, and then it's going to output the matches for us here. So we can see it is done, and just in the next 24 hours, I'm recording this on a Saturday morning, 1,945, 9 pages of games. Now, we didn't add that to the database. We just wanted to check what the output was like, and we can take a look, and you can see it is our custom created array. So we've got the OA ID in there, OA season ID. I've just noticed that I created different columns actually than in here. So let me just update that. This was API ID, and this one is just season ID, and the rest is as it should be. So we are going to go ahead now and actually insert these. Now what this little bit of code here is doing, because there's quite a lot of games, we're chunking them into a group of 1,000. So you're going to have just 2 chunks here, basically. Just takes a bit of pressure off the database. But again, this is just good practice. If you're working locally, it really shouldn't be a problem to just do this as a job lot, given that there isn't like 10, 20, 30,000 at once. So that's why I say it is good practice, because you never know how many fixtures you're going to have. It's better to just chunk them. And what we do here is we chunk them into groups of 1,000. You can adjust this as you see fit. And then for each chunk, we use a Laravel function here, upsert. And we take the chunk of fixtures, we pass the unique ID. Let me change that to API ID. Season ID should also be added in there as well. And that should add in for us now to the database. So let's give it a whirl, shall we? We will refresh this page. And just to show you at the minute, we have no fixtures. So I will jump back to when this has finished fetching the data. Okay, so the script has just finished. I've not refreshed the database yet. Let's give it a whirl. And there we are. We have our database of fixtures. Now then, what's the next step? You can see we've got some games that are postponed here. We've got the majority not started because obviously we were looking into the future. Now what I just want to show you is that you can now take this update fixtures and you could say, let's have this as live. And then you don't need to pass any of these parameters because you're just using the live endpoint. And we can hit that endpoint again. And it's got page 1 and it's updated some games. So if we refresh this now and we order this by Unix ascending, you can see we now have live data in there. We've got the home goals, the away goals. Now this is a very basic database, a very basic table. You could add corners, cards, pressure. It's all accessible via the API. Now we've also got the home name and the away name here. What you could do is turn this into ID and away ID, home ID, away ID, and have a teams table. There is, best practices when creating databases. It just depends on your use case. If you're going to go to production, you're going to have, plenty of people using it. You would want to be as lean as possible. It's called serialization of data, I think, if you want to have a little research on it or just have a look at the best practices in terms of database design. You wouldn't pile everything into the fixtures table. You would just have the sort of bare minimum basics, and then you would have a teams table, maybe a match stats table or fixture stats. You would have odds as a separate table, just so you're not piling everything into one table. Now I saved the season ID because I want to also show you how you can then pull in the stats, and we'll just present the stats for 2 teams, shall we? So let's take a look at one of these live games. So we've got Brisbane Roar. No, let's take a look at the Newcastle Jets game. So Newcastle Jets, Wellington Phoenix. I will use this season ID and we're going to use the stats endpoint to bring in some stats. So stay tuned. So I've just built a new function, as you can see on the right side, show league stats. Probably should be season, just because it's a season ID. But regardless, we've got the stats endpoint here, which is still in beta, always adding to it. And we've got the endpoint is /stats/season/ and then you add the ID. So what we have here, we are passing the fixture ID, which is your own fixture ID from the database. So if we can see here, Newcastle Jets, Wellington Phoenix, we're going to use the ID of the fixture. And then you get the fixture, and then you access the season ID that we saved. And again, you don't have to copy this database structure as it is. You can create your own tables and stuff, but you just hopefully get the gist for how you access the different endpoints and what sort of data you have to save, be it season IDs, team IDs. Team IDs probably I should have saved, to be honest, because you can use these in this endpoint as a parameter. So we'll get all of the stats for every team in this division, but if you wanted to isolate 2 teams, you can do that on the stats endpoint. Now what I will do is just make this function run straight away on my page, and then we'll just kill the rest of that script, just because this one is loading. I've got it set up to load, so we will hit refresh, and hopefully it's going to go to our database, it's going to get the season ID, it's going to go away, and you can see it already has. We've got the data here. So again, info and data, and then you have all of these stats to work with. Now, what you do next with this data is up to you. You could access this data for all live games. You could then, process it and work out some values of your own, or you could save this to your own database. As you can see, there is tons of data for every team. You can also include frozen stats, which will show you all of the data before every game for every team. So it will have a fixture ID in here, and we can see Western Sydney Wanderers, they were one of the teams, weren't they? Let me just double check that in the database. They were not. It was Newcastle Jets, Wellington Phoenix. Western Sydney Wanderers, incidentally, are playing, though, at the same time. So you could still use that. And as I say, on the actual endpoint, you can isolate using the team IDs. So I've just updated this code. So now we're looking at the teams. We set the home team to false, the away team to false. And then we loop through all of the stats, and we just say, at this instance, if it's the same name as the home name that we grabbed from the fixture, then, pull it and show us. You should be using IDs for that. It will be much quicker, and it's just a better way to do it. But let's refresh this page, and it should give us the 2 teams and their data from the game that we have requested. And it does. There is 2 teams here, and this is a good overview so you can see the types of data that you're going to get. And as I say, I'm adding to this all the time with feedback, so you can see the games played. You've got points in here, and for every data point, you've got the averages or the percentages depending on what it is. So here, over and under goals, we say over 1, and it's 92%. Over 3 goals, 64%. So that's pretty high, isn't it? You've got the home percentage, you've got the away percentage, and you can use this and scan this and check this programmatically. And you could also send yourself alerts, flag games for certain markets and stuff. It is up to you, the next step. As always, give me some feedback on this if you've got any. I can't wait to see what you build and what feedback you come back with. And if you've got any questions, as I said earlier, just put them in the description. Put them as a comment on YouTube, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.